So, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned before, my name's Charles Alder. I'm the founder of Fundraising in Australia. Today's presentation is all about smart fundraising ideas for rural and regional projects. And it's a culmination of our experience over the years in terms of fundraising for community and not-for-profit groups, but also during our time when we were running the charity Rural Aid. So today we'll discuss a number of fundraising methods that can be used across different communities. It's not an exhaustive list. We don't talk about grants today. We don't talk about government. We're really talking about how communities can raise the funds that they need in ways that are more community originated. So, all right, let's get started. So a little bit about Rebuilding Australia. For some of you on the call, I know we know each other and that's great to have you back again, but just a little bit about Tracy and myself. We're the original founders of Rural Aid and the Buy a Bale program, where we successfully raised over 100 million in partnership with individuals, corporates, government, philanthropists, all that we'll talk about today. But a lot of our experience has come from the actual coalface, actually doing the work, meeting the people, etc., etc. We've also, over the years, partnered with Peter Kenyon. Many of you will know Peter Kenyon from the Bank of Ideas, which is an organisation in Western Australia. Peter is a phenomenal community rebuilder. He just helps communities really reimagine what their futures could be, and has a great skill set. So, the current situation, and this is not dissimilar to metropolitan areas, but communities across Australia are full of ideas and energy. I think most of our communities are, and the reason you're here today is your community, you've got some ideas and we want to get those ideas funded. But the challenge is that there's only a limited amount of money, supposedly, that's out there for funding community projects and for fundraising in general. So how do we get that money? Grants are super competitive. Many of you will spend a lot of time writing grants to governments or to philanthropists, etc., and be knocked back. That's a real challenge because you can spend a lot of time doing them and spend a lot of money if you're contracting outside parties. And the cost of actually raising money is going up as well. So how can rural communities raise the funds? Smarter, not harder. Let's use our brains. Let's be a little bit more time smart. And let's use some of the technologies that are out there today to help us actually do that. So what would it look like if we stopped chasing dollars the old way and started building smarter fundraising strategies? So what we're going to talk about today, some of this diversity, leverage, talking about partnerships. I want to talk about storytelling. Storytelling is all around these days, but it's super powerful when it comes to actually raising money and pitching your cause against others. So these are the 8 ways today that we're going to talk about raising money. This presentation will be available for you as a PDF at the end, so you don't actually have to write anything down. I'll make sure that you've got it. Hopefully that's good for all of you. But these are the 8 that we're going to talk about today. So there's no grants in here. There's no sausage sizzles. We're talking about moving ourselves up the ladder in terms of where we actually go to attract money. So what is a community foundation? Now, a community foundation is it's not new to Australia, but the concept has been now legislated by the federal government. And what that means is that while we've had the nucleus of community foundations sponsored by groups like Queensland Gives, for example, in Queensland, and other state-based organisations, foundations can now be established by almost any group of people in Australia. I'm actually on the board of a group called the Bayside Community Fund in Brisbane. At the moment, we're effectively managed and we give our money to Queensland Gives, and they invest it for us. And from that money, we actually then distribute the interest that we earn each year. Hopefully that's a little bit better for you. Let me know if it is. Thumbs up for someone. Great. Excellent. So the community foundations concept is not new. It's been around for a while. The prominence now is that because the government has made it more easy to establish and also given them DGR1 tax deductibility in their own rights, it now means that, for example, with the Bayside Community Fund, we accept money. We're able to issue receipts to people for tax deductibility purposes. But the funding that we actually raise is in perpetuity money. So we're raising a corpus of money. Our first target's $250,000. We then distribute the interest, which is given back to us by Queensland Gives every year. So that means that as we grow that amount of money, obviously our interest is going to grow each year, and eventually that fund will have tens of millions of dollars in it potentially. And there are already foundations around Australia that are community foundations that already have many millions of dollars in them, and they are distributing in some cases tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars each year in grants to bodies that they're able to. Now, a community foundation can have the same rules of operation as not-for-profits or charities do. So you can only give money if your community foundation is set to distribute to other community groups like ours is, the Bayside Community Fund. If your foundation is set to distribute money in a far wider ruling as part of your rules, then you can do that as well. So there is an organisation in Australia called the Community Foundations Australia that can help you if you're interested in establishing one of these in one of your local communities. It's actually this will fall into place a little bit further in the presentation today, but establishing a community foundation can really be great for long-term financial viability of communities and really helps them move away from the need to be continually going back to the well and asking for more money. And I'll show you some ways a little bit later in this presentation as to how you can really significantly boost the money in those community foundations. I want to talk about corporate sponsorships. And when we were involved with Rural Aid, one of the things that we found was that when we actually had a good story to tell, many in the for-profit sector, not only big business, but even medium-sized businesses, actually had allocations of money that they were looking to give to community-based projects, but didn't really know where to give it to, or hadn't really received a well-formulated pitch. Now, I know if we're talking about, let's just say we're talking about Point Lincoln, for example, in South Australia, and I'm just choosing a town. In that town, there'll be a number of community-based organisations all pitching for money, but there'll be reasons why the local businesses will give to one instead of giving to another. It may be the scale of the charity or the organisation that's asking for the money. It might be the actual project and the outcomes that project is actually going to achieve for the local community. But it might also be aligned with the corporate ethos of that corporate entity that is looking to give money. In many cases, when corporates actually do give to projects, it's actually been inspired by the staff of the corporate. Many CEOs are busy running their businesses, but what we've found in the past is that organisations, the idea for where to give the money to, whether it be for supporting animals or floods or fires or droughts or children, etc., that comes from a member of the staff who takes the idea up the tree, and eventually the CEO and the board of the organisations decide, yep, you know what, that aligns with what we do. I think that's a good cause. Let's give to it. So if you're looking to create a corporate sponsorship opportunity around a particular community-based project, have a look at the companies that have alignment with the project that you're actually doing. So for example, about 12 months ago, I was at a trade show for Bunnings, and I came across one of the leading paint companies in Australia. And I asked them just this question: how many community-based organisations do you get pitches from to actually supply your product in a community-based way? And they said very few. So I said, if I came to you and said, listen, I'd like 1,000 litres of paint, what do you reckon my chances are? They said pretty much all you got to do is ask and we'll give it to you. So think about if you've got a community-based project and you've got painting, for example, a painting supply company or a local paint distributor or a local painting company might be the perfect corporate partner that you can go to get the funding for that community-based project. So it's not always about the cash dollars, although cash does make the world go round, but many of these corporates are looking for ways in which they can engage, not just with money. It could be product, it could even be time that company is giving over. We've had previous experiences where companies have given us 20 and 30 volunteers for a week at a time. The company's paid for them to fly out and drive out to a particular property, do the work, be accommodated, and then go back to their offices. In fact, one company did it from all around Australia. All the staff came to Queensland from Perth, Sydney, Melbourne, Hobart, even New Zealand. So when it comes to corporate sponsorships, just think about the potential alliances that there might be within companies who have an interest in your particular project or the area in which your project will have effect. Alongside that is this issue of ESG, or environmental, social and governance. Now, in some parts of Australia, this is waning in terms of corporate compliance, but there are still a significant number of companies in Australia who have ESG as a core focus of their corporate culture. And so they're looking to do something in the environmental space. They're looking to do something in the social space. In terms of governance, it's probably not where we're operating, because governance is more the company or the organization and how they particularly internally operate. But when it comes to the E and the S component, again, are there companies that have an interest? Again, here's an opportunity for staff engagement. It could be that the staff are very keen to do tree planting with land care, or they might want to go and do something with a childcare organisation where they might want to go and build a childcare centre or something like that. So when it comes to rural communities, there is a really big opportunity for you to, again, align with companies who have a vision around their own internal existence about what they like to do in the E and the S space. So big tip, align your needs with companies' ESG policies, and most of those are available on their, certainly the ASX listed companies, so all the big ones that are traded on the Australian Stock Exchange, they all have their ESG policies on their website. So you can go and have a look and see what they're actually particularly interested in. Very few of them will have an ESG policy or an E&S policy that doesn't align with their day-to-day business operations. So if your rural project aligns with a particular company's products and services, it's most likely going to align with their E&S as well. So crowdfunding is an interesting space, and these three companies, Chuffed, GoFundMe and MyCause, are probably the most publicly aware. MyCause, for example, is an Australian platform. GoFundMe and Chuffed are both international platforms. But crowdfunding campaigns can be very successful, but they need two really important factors. And these two factors need to drive engagement, and they need to be quick. So a successful crowdfunding campaign has two key characteristics. It's got a powerful story, and it's almost always human-based. So there's a lot of emotion around it. So you will have seen on a lot of the news stories, and come to think of it, I haven't seen as many recently, but there have been in the past quite a significant number of stories on the news each night where there might be a sad death in the family, or someone needs to be transported, for example, from Bali to Australia. You'll see that the families have set up a crowdfunding campaign, most often on GoFundMe. And that campaign is then advertised even with the news story online. So it's got to be a powerful story. It's got to have a great reason for existence. It's got to be emotionally connecting with people, because emotion is what drives engagement. But We also need it to be an easy share platform. So, for example, each of these three platforms has a significant aspect to it, and that is that they have the ability to create great viral movement of the campaign. So whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that people can actually share the campaign. They can share it on socials, they can share it on SMS, but it's got to have a fantastic, really emotional story behind it. And this example of the Kapunda Mural Town project. So Kapunda in South Australia, they're raising money through a GoFundMe campaign to actually have these silos painted in this particular mural. So it's a campaign that the community have all got behind. They're sharing the links. They're inviting other people to support their cause. And for those of you who have seen the wonders of these fantastic painted silos around Australia, it's going to be another great community-based project in Kapunda that's going to put them further on the map as well. Brick by brick campaigns. And the reason I introduced this one to you is because there is a real simplicity in a campaign that is very action focused, is very tangible, and relatively simple to deploy. And the reason why the power is in the simplicity is that in today's day and age, we really don't have time to be spending too much time learning about what the campaign's all about. Again, it's a little bit like crowdfunding. We want to be quick, we want to take some action, and we actually want to be outcomes focused. So a brick by brick campaign, I'm sure some of you have been involved with children over the years and childcare centres where they've done fundraising to build buildings, and you've been able to buy a brick and have your name on it. The similar one here with the Buy a Bale campaign, where people were able to buy a bale of hay on the back of the truck. And once the truck was full, the truck was ordered and the hay was delivered. So these campaigns are really tangible. So if your community campaign, for example, if you were painting the main street, you might break the main street up into square meters and sell the square meters to people. And that would be their 1 square meter of the main street, or that sort of concept. So hopefully that idea actually, it's a really quite simple one, but it's very powerful. And the reason it's powerful is because everybody can see the actual end result. If this hay truck, for example, was only half full, then people would be inspired to fill the rest of the hay truck. If it comes to care packs, for example, and you've got a target of 500 care packs and you know you're only 10 short, for example, you can go back to the same people who bought the 490 and ask them to buy another one each, or you can even go to a corporate and say, hey, listen, can you help us get over the line with the last 10? They're really great. They're very tangible. They show that your organization is actually achieving something. But when it comes to community-based projects, you'll actually find that the community will help push over that particular target that you're looking for. So the whole community can get behind the extra 10 care packs, or the extra square meter of painting, or the extra road beautification project that you've got, or even pushing over to the construction of the community sports facility. Okay, we've now got enough money for the toilet block. That's great. Now let's go and work on the football field, or whatever it might be. So brick by brick campaigns, they're quite simple in their execution, but they're very powerful because they allow everybody to understand where you're up to, how far you've got to go to get to your end mark, and they're very visual. They're very tangible, and consequently very powerful. If you've got any questions as we're going through, thank you, Andrew, for your comment about community foundations. That's great. Micro fundraising. Now, this is a relatively new concept to Australia in terms of platforms, but the actual concept of rounding up is not new to Australia. For example, back in the days, 2018, 2019, Rural Aid had a partnership with Woolworths where we raised over $1 million by people rounding up through the till. So the concept was quite simple. People would round up to the next full dollar, next $5, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now there's a platform called Rounder, which I help promote around Australia. And Rounder as a platform effectively allows every one of your community supporters or people who support your country town or your project or whatever it is that you're actually raising money for. And they can effectively be rounding up every time they use their credit or debit card anywhere in the world. Because effectively what happens through this Rounder app is that I create an account, I link my debit card or credit card to the Rounder app, and each time my credit card is processed through a point of sale or an online portal and I'm buying something, I have a set amount that I want to round up to, say, for example, the next full dollar. And so in this example, I'm spending $12.60. I round up the extra 40 cents and that goes towards the community building facility. The great thing about Rounder is that there's actually no prompt at the point of sale. So what it means is that once you've actually set this up or a supporter has actually set this up, it's almost like a set and forget process. Now, there are limits as to how much money can be rounded up per week, and that's up to the individual, but it's $7.50, $10 or $12.50. So you're not going to swipe your card 500 times this week and donate a few $100s. But micro fundraising like this is gathering attention because it allows organizations to build a regular corpus of funding that comes from their supporters without them having to do mass email campaigns or ask people to take new particular actions. This literally happens in the background, swipe my card, 40 cents, done and dusted. The organization then receives the money in between the 7th and 10th of the following month, and it just continually goes on. There are tax deductibility benefits if your organization is DGR1, and I recommend that as many organizations who can get tax deductibility for their particular projects or their organizations, it can be a real benefit. But Rounder is a fantastic tool that allows you to effectively garner a percentage of each of your supporters' weekly transactions on their debit or credit card. Very, very cool, very simple. It's on the same OSCO platform that all banks operate in Australia, and it's governed by the whole banking system. So it's a fantastic system. Really, the only 3 other places that you can do rounding up on a large scale are Woolies, Domino's, and Coles. There are a few other organizations who've added it, but these guys have mass market penetration, and therefore they're able to attract a lot of money through their customers to round up to their particular causes. With Rounder, every FPOS terminal in the world is effectively a potential trigger point for roundups to your organization. So have a look at it. I think it's phenomenal, and the potential there is very, very significant. In-kind and partnership. Has anybody got any questions so far? I know we're motoring on through. We will have a Q&A time at the end, but if you've got any questions, please drop them into the chat and we'll get to them as well. So in-kind and partnerships. So the reason I've brought up in-kind today is obviously when it comes to community-based projects, particularly in rural and remote communities, raising the cash might be a little bit harder than actually getting items donated, time donated, or materials donated. So the in-kind is a very significant component, and taking in-kind and seeing and using that in-kind to actually attract corporate or cash donations on the other side, if they can see that you've actually attracted some good in-kind value, can really sometimes move the corporates over the line to say, well, listen, you've got so much in kind, that's really great. We won't give you team, we won't give you staff, or we won't give you materials. We'll actually give you some cash, because you can actually tell the story. We've got a lot of in kind, getting some cash is good as well. In kind, though, obviously, while we're going through a cost of living crisis, is also a great way of being able to accept donations when people don't have the cash to give. So always suggest that you go for as much in-kind as possible. And one of the things about asking for in-kind materials, and we've been able to get significant in-kind materials in the past, is that we were very specific about what it was we actually wanted or needed. So much like a shopping list, if you can create that list and be specific about what it is. So for example, if you're after 500 litres of white paint, then once you've got that specific need, then that's what each of the corporates or each of the individuals or those people who are giving the in-kind to you, that's what they can work towards. There's too much of this, hey, have you got any of this sort of attitude? So if you can be as specific as possible, you'll actually find that there's lots of it out there. Just a story today that I was reading about Qantas and the aviation industry and how much good food, questionable maybe, that they throw away each and every week around Australia, just as part of the airline industry. So again, if you're able to be specific about what it was, you listen, could we get 2,000 meals a week from Qantas? You'd probably find that that would be possible. So create a list of needs or wants. Don't be fluffy about it. Be as specific as possible. And again, look to those corporates that are in the space that are doing business with the materials that you want, much like timber offcuts. You know, if you can get the timber from a timber mill or someone like Bunnings or other timber-based companies, if you're specific about what it is that you need, there's a much better chance that you'll actually get it. So I'm going to come to the 2 or 3 slides here, which I think have got enormous potential that are really untapped, particularly in Australia. There's a fair bit of work done in this space in the United States and in Europe, but not so much in Australia. So if we think back to the very early slide that we had about community foundations, the thing about a community foundation is that people invariably give to it because they're giving to a corpus of money that is going to raise interest that then supports communities into the future. Now, there are many people in our communities, and the next slide talks even more about this, but there is a significant transfer of wealth now beginning to happen in Australia due to the baby boomers and the next generation that's coming through. And these baby boomers and government changing superannuation policies and investment criteria on super and private properties, etc., are really making those who have significant value and financial resources in Australia continually look at where they're placing their money. Now, some of the recent superannuation proposals, there's just a new one out at the moment, may well force some people to actually give money to charities or causes in the next 2 or 3 years instead of keeping it in their super fund because they're going to be double or potentially triple taxed. And so as community-based organisations or not-for-profit organisations in rural and remote Australia or councils, etc., that are on this call, being able to structure a request for funding from some of these people who are making these financial changes to their current situations, if you can make a really great call, there's a lot of money potentially in the pipeline. So the thing about legacy is that people who've particularly lived in a community, I know we've got a lovely lady on here called Victoria. She's from Western Queensland. She's got some great people in her community who love the community. And we've got that in every community, but I know Victoria's got lots in hers. Now, a lot of those people, for example, let's just say they're farmers who might have lived in that community for 75, 100 years or even 4 or 5 generations. They may well decide that they want to give something to their community so that when they pass on, that there's a memento or some investment that they have been able to make possible for their community through their generosity, either while they're alive or after they'd passed. Now, the great thing about community foundations is that you can actually put money into the foundation. So if you're a wealthy individual and you want to put money into a foundation today and then see how that interest is being earned and spent over the coming few years before you pass away, then that's a great way to have an input into a community foundation today. The alternative is that you give money in your will, which obviously then has to be administered by your trustees. And in some cases, and probably in many cases these days, wills are being challenged, and so it's not always the case. And this is one of the reasons why we're going to see more money moving out of super over the next 2 or 3 years into opportunities for people to see what happens with their money before they pass. But the wills is great, and bequeaths is a very significant sector of the marketplace for not-for-profit and community-based organisations. It's tens, if not hundreds of millions every year around Australia. Red Cross, Diabetes Australia, Barnardo's, a whole bunch of organisations receive significant amounts of money. I've given 2 examples here of foundations that have been set up by individuals. Paul Ramsey, which is from Ramsey Healthcare. Ramsey Healthcare Foundation gives significant amounts of money to hospitalised healthcare, etc., around Australia. But I'm not sure how many of you know this, but Paul Little, who was the CEO of Toll Transport a number of years ago, a big proportion of his distributions from his foundation each year go to community development. So there is an example of a high net worth individual in Australia who set up a foundation, that personal foundation, that they invest money into each year, but they have a specific request to financially support community development projects. So I think that's, again, legacy. Those in our community, whether they be individuals or whether they be businesses, long-standing families who may decide to donate to their community foundation. Thank you, Victoria. Great tip, great comment. But also bequeaths. So think about how now, to set up a bequeath process for your organisation, it's relatively simple. You can actually get the text online, and almost every solicitor in Australia knows what's required to actually advise their clients to leave money in their will to a charity. So it's not actually particularly hard to establish. But you'd be surprised at how many organisations actually don't have some of these basic fundraising opportunity avenues built into their organisation. Just the difference, for example, of being able to take money for your campaign on Stripe and PayPal. PayPal can be up to 40% of the donations to a campaign. So if your campaign, for example, doesn't have PayPal, you could be missing out on a significant proportion of people who want to support your cause or campaign or particular project. So just think about all the avenues that are out there. You don't have to use all of them, but just think about, the big end of town when it comes to, for example, credit card processing via PayPal or GoFundMe, My Cause, etc. In terms of, you want to use the bigger platforms, but you also want to have a breadth and diversity, which is one of the comments we had very early on in the presentation. The different sorts of bequeaths: obviously a residual is a percentage of the estate, pecuniary is a fixed amount, a specific might be shares or land or property. I know a number of charities, for example, who have been gifted in the past a house. A contingent is obviously, if the partner passes, then from my estate, then my partner's estate will then give over to that particular cause, or the whole estate, which can be absolutely everything. So just have a look at and try and talk to a local solicitor, talk to your board, talk to whoever is responsible for the fundraising avenues to make sure that you cover those. So I really want to talk about this one, because this is a significant golden goose in Australia, which is really, really untapped. Now, if you haven't heard of what's called a primary ancillary fund, it's a tax vehicle that has been established by the federal government some years ago. And ideally, it's designed to allow high net worth individuals to put money into a fund each and every year, but they have to distribute at least 5% of the assets of that fund every single year. Now, this is the intergenerational wealth transfer. We're talking $3.5 to $5.4 trillion. Okay, huge amount of money. Now, primary ancillary funds currently in Australia have about $10 billion under management. With a good stock market year, that can go up quite considerably.
And there's over 3,880 of these funds currently in existence, which means, sorry, by law, that they have to distribute $500 million a year of their funds to charitable causes. Now, you do have to be a DGR1 recipient, but that doesn't stop organisations and community-based groups actually getting that status from the tax department. But what this really means is that once you've actually established a relationship with a primary ancillary fund, so again, Paul Little, for example, might have the Paul Little Foundation, but he might also be running a primary ancillary fund as well. They can actually set their PAFs to distribute to the same organisation year after year after year without you actually having to repitch. So there are some significant benefits in terms of creating a value proposition and approaching some of these high net worth individuals who have these PAF funds. Now, most of these PAFs are set up by financial planners. So if you know people in your community who are financial planners, then you can always take your proposition to them and ask them, A, to review it, but B, is it something that some of their clients may be interested in actually reviewing? Now, no financial planner is actually going to tell you who of their clients actually have a primary ancillary fund. But those financial planners do advise their clients each year where to distribute their 5% of assets, and they give them ideas. Now, some of these people will make up their own minds, but they also do take long-term investment advice and structure advice from their financial planners. So every financial planner in Australia understands the PAF process. Many of them will have clients who have PAF accounts. And if your community-based project or your regional-based project actually has great merit and can align with the PAF's values and the values of the founders of that PAF, then you may well find yourself being able to attract not only an initial year's contribution, but also multiple years after that. So it's a huge fund. We're talking 500 million here a year. A significant portion of that is actually untapped. I know of a number of financial planners who are literally, they come to me and say, where should we send some money this year? Who do we talk to? Because they're not actually getting presentations from charities nor from communities that have actually got a really good call to action. So if you haven't considered philanthropists and primary ancillary funds as part of your financial mix, then I suggest that you actually have a look at it, because it can be a very significant source of money for your community. So we've done about 40 minutes. I'm going to open it up to some questions if you've got any. You can write them in the chat if you like, or if you want to take yourself off mute. The call is being recorded. We will record the questions because many cases other people have similar questions. So if you're happy for your question to be read out, or if you're happy to ask the question, more than happy for you to come off mute if you like and ask the question. Does anybody have a question they'd like an answer to? Ash, I note your email from earlier today in relation to your project. How do you think approaching some of the high net worth individuals in your communities who might have PAF funds might be able to work for you? Do you think, have you thought of that in the past, maybe? Answer the chat or answer the question if you like, either way. Andrew, did you have a question you wanted to talk about community foundations?
Yeah, g'day, Charles and everyone. First time I'd heard about Rounder. So
Yep.
would it be feasible to use Rounder within a particular geographic location? For example, where you could say, no matter whether you're going to Bunnings or Woolies or whatever, like everybody could, choose to donate through a campaign, for example, to the local community foundation.
You could do that, absolutely. Effectively, because Rounder works on every EFTPOS terminal, you're going to pick up triggers of donations. So wherever I use my card, for example, I trigger a donation and the organisation that I've aligned myself to that gets the money, it's automatically distributed to them. So you could use it on a localized basis, but I think the greater opportunity is the much wider capture, particularly, for example, if you look at a rural project where there are lots of people, for example, who might have lived in St. George in rural Queensland. They've now moved to the Big Smoke. They've moved to Brisbane or Sydney or whatever, but they want to support a community-based program or an event or something back in St. George. They can actually do that by doing their shopping and doing whatever they do in Brisbane and Sydney by rounding up every time, and that money goes back to St. George. So there are different ways in which the money can be initiated and then effectively redistributed through Rounder. Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yep, it does. And also what I'm just so I'm clear, like, so what I'm hearing from what you said, Charles, is you could choose to deploy Rounder in general, like, you know, contribute to a foundation or whatever, or you could also choose to deploy it specifically. So, you know, we want to build a new X in this area.
Yep, absolutely. And you could run a campaign specifically for that building, or you could run a campaign for the community foundation. In fact, you can have multiple campaigns on the Rounder platform, and your users can switch between the campaigns that they want to support from time to time.
Excellent. Thanks.
Yep. Cool.
Oh, yeah, Charles, it's Ash here.
Yes, Ash.
My mind's spinning with potential.
Ash, I really have to share with you, I think the potential for your project with some legacy, the community foundation, I think opportunity is great for your community. B, I think the legacy component of a lot of the primary producers in your community would be great. And C, I think the primary ancillary funds. Again, with those PAF funds, a lot of the people who have high net worths in Australia, for example, have connections to rural communities, but they're just, you know, they live in Sydney or they live in Melbourne or they live in Brisbane, and they're really not sure what's going on in Cootamundra or Cunnamulla. And so by actually tapping into these PAF funds, you can actually tap into some regular, recurring, gifted money year after year. So I just think they'd be a great avenue, Ash, for your project.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Pleasure. Anybody else got any other questions? I'm sure there's someone out there that's got a curly. Victoria?
I do. Good morning, Charles.
Good morning.
I'm like Ash. My mind's just gone kaboom, and I really love that because I feel in a lot of our small communities that grant funding and having to go for a grant has been I guess we've had blinkers on and we've just kept going down that same line without diversifying our thoughts and looking at our assets and the people around us and how can we capture them when they leave or that investment. And I like the idea of the community foundation. As the president of our local progress group, a lot of our small towns have one. And as we all know, our volunteering levels are declining. But this sort of foundation could be a wonderful compromise with the funds that are currently in our small progress groups, and capitalising on that and keeping it in town, but growing it within our foundation system. So I guess my question is, would the Community Foundations Australia come and do some road trips if we contacted them and do tours to some of our small towns and really pitch the idea of building that foundation with the funds we've got, and what does that look like, and having I guess that master plan with the community?
Victoria, listen, I think myself or Peter or Community Foundations Australia would do it. There's probably a fee for service for most of them to actually get out there and do it, obviously. But the advice, but it's the point you raised around the collective is the strength in this. And I know you and I have spoken about community foundations before. We really need to give the community foundations a really significant launch. And by being able to tap into some of the PAF money or some of the high net worth individuals who might have their own foundations that we're as yet unaware of, we can really, by getting $100,000 or $200,000 investment by some of those people in our communities, the legacy community members or the PAF fund or those people who've moved out of town, they can really give our community foundations a great launch. And I think from there, the multiplier effect happens that much faster. But yeah, every community should have a community foundation the same way they should have a progress association. And, what you and I experienced in South Australia recently at the Bank of Ideas conference, and just the number of people in that room who were talking about community foundation establishments, there's a real opportunity to drive that number up quickly and hopefully put lots of money into them.
No, that's right. So yeah, I think it's getting that word out. But yeah, it's really, I guess, being targeted. There's a lot of smaller towns than ours further west here in Queensland, and I know these are valuable conversations that I think they're really trying to seek. So that's why I just asked, if I can have the conversation, could we do a tour, or at least 2 or 3 tours? Could we partner with, the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation or FRRR and take this on the road, and it'll do at least 6 months and talk about community foundations. And I think from that too, it will make our communities independent of always getting sick and tired of approaching council and seeking that level of support from from the roles or the officers that might work in council that we maybe assume should be doing that for us. It will allow us to be independent and look at it and say, okay, well, we can do this, and we've got the people here on the ground to do that, and then work in partnership with the council, I guess. Yep. In that greater regard. So thanks, Charles. I'll be in contact. Yeah,
no, Victoria, I think you're right on the money there. Communities are sick and tired of continually asking for money. Yeah. And these community foundations, once they're established, I mean, if you think about the Australian government's future fund, for example, that I think Peter Costello he set up originally, and he was on the board of or president of not long ago. They've almost doubled their money. So the concept of having these foundations, which have got a corpus of money, which are being invested and supplying the interest income in returns back to the communities, just means these communities become far more viable. And I think that's really important longer term, that these communities also won't die as quickly as some are, because the services are being taken away. In many cases, some of these community foundations can actually fund those services that keep the fabric of these communities going. But if the foundation's not there in the first place, then council have got to pick up the ball, and they're not going to do that, and the state governments aren't. So there's a real opportunity for communities with these community foundation ideas to really be in charge of their own future, their own destiny, by having these corpuses of money.
That's so true. And just one more, Charles, just for everyone too. So I know there's a lot of drought workshops. How can we be drought ready? That is happening. And I think maybe the foundations is a way of it, the community building their community foundation to have the funds to help their local community in a drought, rather than always trying to seek external as well. And then there's also the patient travel subsidy, that is well below par with a lot of our communities who need to go off for medical and health. And so while the conversation with the governments can happen on an increase, in my mind, I find that there's an opportunity maybe for the foundations to help with that subsidy at a local level for our communities. Anyway, Charles, you've blown my mind as usual. Thank you. Valuable webinar. Love it.
All good, Victoria. Glad I can help. Lisa, love the idea, Victoria. Yes, Mundubra Enterprise Association. Yeah, Lisa, I think the opportunity here is to get everybody on board who actually would like to be part of this roadshow. And then, like Victoria's just suggested, we don't have to go town to town to town. We could have there could be, 10 towns come to a bigger town where we could all get the information. Yes, Andrew, thank you can also be set up across wider regions. Yep, absolutely. Cool. Anybody else got any other questions? I'm sure that some of you are just listening in the background, and hopefully you've got something out of today. There will be a copy of this video sent, so you'll be able to follow up with it. If you have got any other questions, or if you'd like some assistance with any of these projects, this is where you can contact me. Obviously, you're all on our email list, and I thank you for your spending your day with me today and learning a little bit about this. I'm really, really super positive about actually, I want to see outcomes happen, and I want to see these opportunities embraced. And I really want to try and en masse get as many of these rural communities across Australia to be, like Victoria just alluded to, be self-sufficient, be drought ready, be fire ready. And a lot of that comes from being able to have the financial resources without having to tap state government, federal government, or anybody that, you know, is the person who's holding the purse strings. If your community holds the purse strings, you can pretty much have whatever your community's hearts and desires can come up with. So we'll finish the presentation there. Thank you for those who've asked some questions and jotted notes in there. Thank you, Joe, Ash, Peter, Karen, Victoria. Thank you all. We do have another Rebuilding Australia Zoom next week in relation to multicultural communities across Australia. It's a fantastic Zoom. I've already seen the presentation for it. If multicultural is part of your community, then jump on that and have a look as well. Okay, guys, thanks very much for your day. Hopefully you've got something out of it, and together we can build some great rural communities. Thank you. See you later.